I returned to my grandfather's house not just to find memories, but to escape the noise of the city. But from the moment I stepped over the rotting wooden threshold, I felt like an intruder. This house wasn't empty. It was filled with the breath of the past, whispers pressed tight into every grain of wood. That afternoon, I found an old leather-bound notebook wedged in a wall niche next to the altar. The pages were yellowed and so brittle they felt like they would turn to ash at the slightest touch. My grandfather's handwriting was normally neat, but in the final pages, it became jagged and trembling as if he were writing while being watched. One line was crossed out repeatedly: "They don't want bones. They want warmth." At the time, I laughed it off as the ramblings of a senile man. Tonight, that laughter froze in my throat. It began at midnight. I woke up feeling something crawling across my face. A tickling, freezing sensation. When I reached up to wipe it away, it was a long jet black strand of hair, soaking wet. But I was alone and my hair was cut short. I clicked on my flashlight. As the beam swept over the altar, my heart nearly stopped. The porcelain incense burner I had meticulously cleaned earlier was now turned backward. What was terrifying wasn't just that it had moved, but that a muddy handprint had been pressed onto it. The fingerprints were abnormally long, etched deep into the ceramic glaze. Then I heard footsteps. Not on the floor but beneath the floorboards. Heavy, slow thuds, as if a massive object was being dragged across the damp earth directly below where I stood. I stepped back, my legs shaking. With every step I took, the sound moved with me as if it were tracking me through the rhythm of my heartbeat. By 2 a.m., the house began to cry. Thick, brownish-black water started leaking from the cracks in the ceiling, hitting the floor with a rhythmic, agonizing drip, drip. The stench of mud and rotting carcasses was now so overpowering I had to cover my nose with my shirt to keep from gagging. Then the scratching from the storage room began. Click, click, click. 3 beats at a time, rhythmic like an eerie invitation. I felt hypnotized, my feet moving toward it of their own accord. When I pressed my eye against the crack in the wood, I prayed it was just a rat or the wind. It wasn't. On the other side of that crevice was a face. The skin was peeling, pale, and bloated like a corpse that had been in a river for weeks. Its eyes were milky white without pupils, veined with tiny streaks of red. Most terrifyingly, it didn't blink. It stared at me with a primal, ravenous hunger. And then it began to whisper in the voice of my own mother, who had passed away 10 years ago, "Come in here with me, it's so cold down here, my child." I screamed, recoiling so hard I tripped over the mahogany bed. At that moment, the floorboards beneath me began to splinter. Gray, skeletal hands, thin as dried branches, burst from the earth, coiling tightly around my ankles. They were cold as ice and possessed an inhuman strength. I looked down and saw that beneath the floor was no ordinary soil. It was a sea of crowded heads, thousands of milky white eyes staring upward. This was the Valley of the Forgotten Souls. Those buried in mass migrations, people without identities, now searching for a living vessel to take their place in the dark. I grabbed my grandfather's notebook and the incense burner from the altar. In the diary on the very last page, was a single line written in crimson: "Fire and ash." I understood. I grabbed the lighter from the altar, ignited the notebook and threw it into the ash within the burner, then shoved the whole thing into the gaping maw opening beneath the floor. A piercing shriek erupted, not human but like the sound of thousands of insects being burned alive. The hands loosened. I seized the chance and bolted for the front door. I ran without stopping through the bamboo groves, letting the thorns tear at my skin. The moonlight behind me seemed to be swallowed by the old house. When I reached the main road and looked back, the house stood silent and cold, but on the roof dozens of black silhouettes stood watching me, their hands waving a slow mechanical goodbye. After that night, I suffered from a high fever for a month. Doctors couldn't explain the black, hand-shaped bruises on my ankles. They never faded. Now, whenever I stand in a quiet room, I hear that click, click, coming from inside the walls. And sometimes, in the mirror, I see my own eyes flicker with a milky white light. My grandfather was right, they don't want bones. They want my soul. And I know one day I will have to go back to that hollow, to give the rest of my warmth to them.